Hello, everybody. My name is Richard Brent. I'm the editor-in-chief here at Briefing magazine, which talks about anything under the very apt strapline these days of smarter legal business management. And thank you to you all for joining me today for this first event that we are running here in partnership with NetDocuments under the banner of Work Inspired. This is designed to support law firms on their journey towards increasing productivity and delivering better value to their clients in several key respects, namely helping them to protect, to organise, deliver, plan and learn from work. This is a roundtable session on the theme of protect to kick us off, against cybercrime and data loss, of course, which we know from many reports continues to be a top risk factor for law firms, both to short-term business continuity and longer-term reputation. I'll first of all introduce you all to each other. So joining us today, we have got Jeff Westcott, who is the Director of IT Service Delivery at Akin Gump. We've got Graham Horsham, Head of Information Systems and Technology at Carpmaels Ransford. We have Francesc Munoz Molina, who is Chief Information Officer at Cuatrecasas. We have Andy Chubb, Information Security Analyst at Irwin Mitchell, and Guy Treloar, who is the Head of IT Operations at Osborne Clarke. Thank you, all of you. We also have here Guy Phillips, who's the VP of International Business for the EMEA and APAC regions at NetDocuments. And before we get stuck into the discussion this morning, Guy, would you like to say a few words on sort of NetDocuments' perspective on this challenge, sort of top-line thoughts?
Sure. So I think from a NetDocuments point of view, we've always looked to try and lead the market, or certainly stay at the very forefront of the market in terms of security around document management. For those that you don't know, NetDocuments has been in this sector for about just over 20 years now, always being a multi-tenant cloud platform for provision of document management to firms around the world. Approximately just under 3,000 clients worldwide, and servicing around about 10 billion documents at any one point in time. So that's obviously growing, and with that grows the demand for security. And so this session today really is just looking at your thoughts and getting your ideas around the issues that impact yourselves. But from a NetDocuments point of view, we're continually trying to enhance our service provision, so that feedback is always very useful. But also just in terms of our progression of our products, I'll talk a little bit about that as we walk through where I think that it's pertinent to bring those topics up to the forefront, as perhaps we talk about some of the issues that you're facing in your firms or how you've addressed different topics. And then I'll chime in as appropriate, rather than just giving a full sales speech at the beginning, and treat it more as a round table so that we can share ideas and thoughts and give you some visibility of what we're doing in the market as well. So hopefully that will give Richard an opportunity to just sort of segue into some of the discussion topics.
That's excellent. Thank you very much, Guy. Yes, definitely any practical sort of examples of challenges will be very valuable. I want to start off though with sort of the bigger picture. I mean, cybersecurity is one of the themes that Briefing looks at every year in its Legal IT Landscapes survey, where we ask questions about all sorts of different aspects of firms' strategic technology choices, both sort of what they're doing at the moment and sort of what their intentions are in the year ahead. And last year, one of the significant findings, I think, was in the cybersecurity section, was we found that 87% of firms said that they were seeing a significant increase in client security information requests and sort of, requests for audits, for example, and that was up from 72% that said the same the year before. So I wanted to start really by sort of sense checking that with all of you here. Is that something that you have seen as a trend in the last couple of years, and has that changed again given what we've all been going through over the past 6 months. Anyone have a first take on that? How about you, Andy?
Yeah, we've seen an increase year on year on the number of our clients that we work with wanting to make sure that our security is what they think it is. And it's going more detail. They want to drill down, not just take the first response. They'll often come back and ask for more detail on certain points and more evidence as well.
Can you tell us a little bit about the particular things that they're more interested in now? You said they're asking for different information as well as
just verification on things, particularly around the cloud.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, in our case, it's not only about cloud, it's about the whole processes that you roll on security issues. And probably for this reason, we have, last year, we have been certified at ISO 27001, because it will help our clients to create this more, they can rely more in our security process. It's not only because at the end, with some, especially finance clients, they go sometimes into your house to do the audit. Sometimes it depends on the size of the clients, but it's absolutely increasing, sometimes overwhelming. Yeah.
I'd echo that. We have seen an exponential number of clients sending through questionnaires, particularly in the last 6 months. The volume of inquiries about our security arrangements has gone up significantly. The depth of the information they're seeking has also increased. We've been 27001 for 3 years now, and when we first kind of got that accreditation, we found that was quite often sufficient. You know, if you send a copy of your certificate, that'll do. No more. They're really looking to go into the guts of things. They fairly regularly will ask to complete an audit. We've had financial services clients on site for up to a week at a time. You're working with them. Some of these processes take over a year to meet their needs. So it's a big job, and it's one which seems to be growing all the time.
Yeah, and just to add into that, something we had recently, we've had 27001 for quite a while now, and usually a certificate is quite sufficient to show people that we've got it. But now people are asking also to see the statement of applicability behind it, to see what it's actually being covered as well.
Yeah, I'd kind of say the same kind of things as everyone else is. I mean, maybe I'm slightly more enviable position. In fact, I mean, we're an IP firm. Historically, we get very few requests from clients. We get 1 or 2 a year, you know. But in the last year, well, I've done 2 in the last 6 months. So I mean, for us, that's a big sort of jump. But I can understand why it's quite onerous, because certainly one of the first questions is, have you got a certification? And then there's another 80 questions as well. So that doesn't just tick the box anymore.
Yeah, I think we've had half a dozen questionnaires in the last week.
Yeah.
Wow. And is that, can I ask, is that coming primarily from the financial services sector, or is it across all sectors that you're?
No, it is across all sectors. We're fairly, we deal heavily in the technology space as well. So, you know, we've got a number of clients there, and they're particularly interested as well. But it's coming from everywhere. People want to know that their information is safe before they start trading with you, or even, you know, midway through, kind of their engagement at a 12-month point, something like that. It's quite often an annual event. So yeah, we're just seeing people a real step up in the interest of what you're doing with their information.
The finance was first probably, but now it's mainstream. All sectors, all clients are requesting that. Yeah.
I think one of the things that has been interesting as well is that rapid rise of requests, and almost a little bit of the knee-jerk reaction to trying to put policy and in processes, you know, really quickly, and how we've been able to sort of manage to, you know, the actual practice of how people work, sort of, you know, combine those together. And I think certainly what we've learned, and I'm sure lots of other people have learned, is you kind of have to take that on a very sort of gradual scale. You can't just change how people work overnight. Otherwise, you just force them elsewhere, you know, outside the DMS into other areas that are easier to work with. So that's been, you know, the sort of processes around that, and actually the practice has been the challenging bit, I think, of that volume of trying to make sure you're not just promising the earth to your clients, but you're actually able to deliver that in practice as well.
And do you look to your suppliers to furnish you with the support for that kind of review, that compliance request that you get from your clients? Do the supplier network that you work with support you in those activities?
Not really.
For myself, we always look at multiple suppliers for a particular solution we're aiming for. So we're actually looking at NetDocuments ourselves at the moment. So we've got a standard set of questions we sent out for suppliers, which include, like, contract terms, what do you do with your data? Have we got the right to audit? Things like that. We haven't got a hard and fast rule, but we just try and follow good practice for that supplier chain management.
Yeah, the reason I ask is that at NetDocuments, we quite often get clients coming to us asking us to help them with the completion of that. And we have a compliance department, because obviously as a supplier, we need to adhere to all the necessary compliance at the very highest level, because we're working with the financial services sector, in particular some of the larger banks. And so, quite often we get those reviews coming through to us as well for assistance. So I was just curious as to whether you get that same level of engagement from other suppliers.
I think we almost, I think it's, you kind of see it as almost a way to de-risk, and I think when you're trying to do these things internally, it's an awfully hard thing to do to certify yourself. So when you're buying an external client, cloud provider or whoever, it's easier to put the onus onto them to prove, how they're storing the data, how, where it is, and that's their job. So we're increasingly moving into that as a service rather than trying to do it ourselves in-house, which is, we just don't have the capabilities and the resources to do that.
Yes, certainly when we instruct a new supplier, there'll be a full supplier due diligence exercise undertaken, which kind of evolves over time. That questionnaire which we send out to them, we're almost moving to publishing our expectations rather than asking them to fill in a questionnaire, because it's easier to, rather than going through a questionnaire and ticking the boxes or responding, if we make our statement, then it's down to that supplier to tell us where they don't meet those expectations.
And therefore you inherit the compliance from the supplier in that fashion. Yeah.
And having done that, does anyone actually do an annual, say, review or follow-up of those suppliers?
Yes.
We're not quite annual because we've got too many suppliers, but it's something which we are actually in the midst of now, making sure that our latest requirements are up to date. So the complication for us is how we go about getting over 400 suppliers to respond. And so we're kind of working on delivering that in a way which just it rotates. So obviously those contracts with suppliers aren't updated on an annual basis, or so they are updated on an annual basis, but it's not all at once. So we can't mail shot 400 people and expect them to respond. So as each contract comes up for review, that's the point at which it would insert any new terms or expectations.
Yeah, we actually do a lot more work now on actually intake. So having that set of non-functional requirements, which has grown, significantly over the last few years, and actually doing the same as Guy, really putting that into a package. Because otherwise, we're answering the same questions about SSO, about encryption, about all the rest of the stuff, and it's we're doing it so much more now that it's easier to get a package and say, well, this is our hefty list of requirements, and if you want to be able to be a supplier to us, you need to be able to meet them. And it does exclude a lot of the smaller kind of more whizzy legal tech stuff out of that mix, because a lot of the times they can't meet that kind of stringent requirements that we need.
It was interesting you said that the challenge of expecting people to change the way they work, I think you actually said overnight or something like that, in very short order anyway, because of course in one respect that's exactly what people have had to do 6 months ago, 6 months ago, isn't it? So I was interested in everybody's sort of experience of whether any of that spike in interest they've seen from clients is because of the challenges of remote working, home working particularly? Would you attribute it to that, or?
To some extent, I think I would. I think everybody's very conscious of all the scams which are out there, and as a consequence, there's a greater expectation that you're doing something, that you are responding. And I think that's all I can attribute the increase in volumes to.
Right.
Is the coronavirus.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I think, for us, we've kind of got an information governance program, and once you've started publishing things that you're doing in that space, clients obviously want to then know what you're doing, and especially over over this period is how that changes when now people are working. You've theoretically secured the office. How are you securing 900 offices around the world? And I think you've got to be able to then prove that your systems are robust, and I guess remote first helps you to be able to make sure that if they're robust outside the office, then they'll obviously be robust inside the office as well.
And on the point about your resource, resourcing all of this activity and I suppose budget for it, is that something that your firms are reviewing or would need to review in light of sort of the sort of news that we've heard about firms people potentially now spending more time remote working in the longer term future? Would that need another review?
I guess there's less money spent on travel, so there's some around. But I think definitely it takes a different set of capabilities and resources to support those number of home offices and what people do in them, and you don't get that kind of same touch of being able to see everyone in the same place or in multiple locations.
Anybody else got any experiences of the remote working point, particularly that they can share, and the changes that they've had to introduce or that they might be thinking of introducing?
So we've had from our perspective, I mean, they've got a couple of IT partners. The COO have been quite instrumental in sort of suggesting that probably more security needs to be done. So we don't necessarily have the luxury of working with budgets. So everything we want to do is kind of through a business case. So things like MFA, which we're about to implement, for example, looking at DLP, things that maybe we wouldn't have been able to talk about so easily last year. This year, it's much more, okay, what else can we do? So from that perspective, it's been quite a good sort of conversation starter with the board.
So certainly from a supplier perspective, we've seen a lot more interest in, and as you referred to there, Graham, in DLP and just data governance generally, and the data residency and the implications of that and how you manage that. And in some ways probably quite relevant today. It's really trying to find a way that you can manage those processes where it's the prevention rather than the cure. We've all heard the stories of people having data breaches and things like that. So actually securing that data in the first instance, down to a document level or a client level or a matter level, so that you're actually adhering to those policies internally and locking those documents so that only certain people can see them or carry out certain functions with them. So you inhibit the ability to email a document if it's a particular secure document or a specific client that you want to lock that down to. So that DLP that you referred to, Graham, is becoming more and more prevalent in discussions nowadays. We're seeing that on a regular basis, and that's one of those continual improvement areas of NetDocuments, the bringing in of the DLP capabilities into the product, and to refine that down to different levels as to what you can do with different documents or matters or clients, and put restrictions around them just to enhance the security model that's in place in the firm, both locally in the head office and also remotely for people traveling.
Yeah, one of the points that we have worked those days is about delivering huge packages of patches and applications. So one of the things that one is to remote work, But at some point, are you going to go to the office and then you are going to update your patches? And a different architecture is when you need to deploy those huge amount of packages in your home. So then, and everybody is at home. So this we have made our architecture IT this reversible in order to be able to deliver all kind of applications anywhere you are. And this is key for security. This is one of the things that we have been working in the last week to really accomplish this kind of architecture.
Do you find that easier with cloud applications, Francesc?
Well, I mean, yeah, but okay. If you have to deliver Office, is a huge package, and we have to, because then what you need to change is your architecture. It's not as much, of course. If you are everything cloud-based, then it's easier. But you are not going to be never full cloud. So then you have to be able to deploy those kind of applications also remotely. So again, all of us are quite cloud oriented, I believe so. But at the end, you have several applications that are not cloud delivered.
I was just going to say, because it's especially over that sort of overnight piece, you know, the one thing that has gone away is paper. And, you know, we had people screaming that they couldn't live without paper, you know, for 2 weeks, and then they realized they could. And I think in terms of security, I think there was that sort of certain element of physicality about the document that you have, and you sent it, you couried it to your client, and they received it, and that transaction and chain was complete. And I think it does bring into mind, you know, what now that is electronic, where is that document? You know, who's had access to it? And now we're still, you know, we're almost overnight storing huge amounts more in the DMS, and people are actually using it, you know, for what it's intended for, rather than just a filing system for printing out stuff. You know, and you just don't have that lineup of all the big packages across the, you know, the hallway that are waiting to be sent out to clients. That's all electronic. So brings in different challenges like signatures. You know, that was a big early one to overcome. But certainly has driven people to be thinking more and more about their, you know, where is this document? You know, because now it's not physical.
Guy, weren't you that you could track that people were using the system more over the lockdown period?
Yeah, so actually, if I just duck to one side, then the screen that I've got behind me is actually our network operating center over in the US in Lehigh, our headquarters, and the operating center is effectively like mission control for us. And this allows us to look at our global infrastructure. So we've got data centers in the US, in the UK, in Germany to cover the European markets. As a result of Brexit, that's sort of gone off the radar a little bit at the moment, just coming back. And then over in the Far East, covering the Asia Pacific region as well. So we've got the data centers, and then all of that is monitored centrally through this operations center that I'm talking about. But what that gives us the ability to do is to monitor very, very closely the performance of each of those data centers, to look primarily at load balancing to make sure that we're getting the right levels of performance for all of our clients wherever they're located in the world, because they're all using the identical same application. It's one application worldwide rather than multiple instances on hosted environments locally. The data centers support the same application, which gives us the ability to then look at that and say, where do we need to consider performance improvements, because we're starting to see trend changes. And one of the big trend changes that we saw over the last few months has been that previously there were peaks and troughs very much by geographic region, where there would be peaks early in the morning, first thing in the morning, and then depending on the geographic region, and then a drop off during the sort of lunchtime period, and then a peak immediately after that, and then a slow run down towards the end of the day, and then a drop off. And what we've identified is that there's been an excess of a 10% productivity gain based on the number of documents going into the DMSs globally. And the storage side of that has indicated that, but also a flattening out of that line of usage. So what we're seeing is people working from home are actually way less inclined to take breaks during the day at a regular time slot from 1 till 2 or 12:30 till 1:30, there's a much more level playing field throughout the day, which then results in it's actually easier to performance manage that from load balancing perspective, but it also indicates that there's greater productivity over the course of the day in terms of usage analysis that we're pulling back off the systems, but also the volume of storage that's going through on the system. So that's quite an interesting change, that clearly people working from home are actually probably using more of their time that was previously used for the commute is now partially being used towards the work rate, and seeing increases in those areas. I don't know whether that reflects the same in your individual organisations, whether you're seeing that similar sort of pattern of work.
Yeah, people have got much more.
Go ahead.
Sorry, people have gone much more 24/7. People are on more earlier in the morning and later at night, for what we're dealing with, rather than peaks and troughs throughout the day.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think it's a lot more about flexible. People have got childcare to handle. They've got different commitments going on. So I think that whole idea of the 9 to 5 work week has sort of gone almost completely over, again, overnight, which is, does make it challenging when you've got, you want to do your maintenance, you want to do patching, you want to do things like that. So you've got to be much more flexible about when, we're certainly seeing exactly the same thing is, with our VPN logins and Citrix and things like that, you're seeing a lot more of a flat line, across the day as people come and go, rather than that big sort of jump, post work finishing, or and the same goes with weekends as well. I think people are not necessarily seeing it as a 5-day work week. I think there's a lot of flexibility, and especially certainly for us, a lot of flexibility being given to accommodate that, because I think you understand that that's how not just you're working, but also your clients are working.
So does that present challenges for you guys in terms of the management of the internal IT infrastructure? If you're running your own data, your own applications on your own service in your local data centers or remotely for maintenance purposes, when is a good time to shut them down to do upgrades, and how you deal with that? Obviously cloud, we just do an incremental changes as we're moving along, so there are constant changes that are coming into play as and when clients need to adopt those, they can do. But I guess that presents some pretty significant challenges for in-house managed infrastructure.
The window is smaller. Yeah, that's right.
I'm coming at it much more from the point of view that people work in different hours. Flip side is that our support contracts are still 7 in the morning till 8 at night, whereas obviously they're working different hours and they want support that hasn't changed to reflect the different needs of the people that want that IT support throughout the day now. So that's something we're going to have to look at addressing, rather than leaving people hanging at 10 o'clock at night kind of thing.
Sorry, Graham.
So from my perspective, the support, that maintenance stuff for us hasn't really changed. There's probably a bit more weekend working. The support that we've had to provide is more about helping the users with their remote working challenges. If someone's laptop blows up, then we've got to get them a new one. So how do we rebuild that? Predominantly, we can only build that when we're in the office. So it's more some of the logistics of providing support remotely than actual on-premise type support. That's just for us, because we're quite a small firm in comparison to yourselves, because we're only about 270 odd people. One office as well, which helps.
Yeah, I think just to go back to Guy's point on the availability and patching, I think it depends where you are in terms of how much high availability you've built into your systems. We're relatively fortunate; we have high availability on everything, so we can in effect patch when we want. We choose to patch once a month because it kind of fits in with various cycles. But if you've kind of been able to invest to that level, then obviously you're fortunate, and the impact is not so great.
Yeah, and certainly we moved to NetDocuments from iManage, a few years ago, and I think not having those, God, I don't know, 80, 90 servers in-house to manage that need rebooting, patching, restarting has been a big benefit when it comes to this kind of thing. But on the flip side, not having the choice of when your suppliers decide to do their maintenance or downtime, and having that convenient for yourself is something that's definitely hit us a little bit, where it hurts sometimes, when we don't want, we've got a particularly big deal going on and there's nothing we can say. You can't say, can you stop doing your planned maintenance for your 10 million customers?
Yeah, I know we've moved away from doing, as historically cloud providers tended to do sort of 2 or 3 annual major updates, and we heard that from the client base, and we're trying to move more to incremental change as it moves along, where you don't have to have those significant downtimes that were perceived in the previous sort of 3-4 years ago. Then there were downtimes that were quite considerably more than that, but I think we're moving away from that, and I think cloud providers need to learn from that and make sure that if you're providing a single cloud instance globally, then you need to accommodate that working basis that everybody has, and particularly how that's changed over the last 6 months, really. Just
yeah, and I think you can bear a few hours downtime, and especially if you can communicate it well up front and you can give people options, store documents locally, whatever it is. But it's, yeah, you're right, that whole anything over 12 hours is just is not regardless of whether it's on a weekend or whenever it is, it's just not possible anymore.
One other specific point we wanted to touch on, which perhaps connects to the productivity discussion, was need to know security policies, and whether that's something that you're looking at in the same piece of research that I mentioned, our legal IT landscape survey from 2 years ago. Just a third of respondents said that they already applied need to know security as a default for new matters. But 18% said they were looking at doing that in the next year or so, which presumably means by now. Is that something that you're either doing or is on your radar?
That's a question we ask at matter opening. So, would you like it to be locked down? I think that the time will come when that's the default, i.e. would you like it not to be locked down? But there's a lot of people who do take advantage of that straight away, and you lock that matter down to the people that are named by that, and then you review that every 6 months at a minimum. But or the risk and compliance team do that on our behalf. But yeah, I think that will flip to become the absolute norm.
At the moment, you ask the client.
No. So it's the client team who stipulate to the IT team on creation of the matter whether that matter should be restricted. Yeah.
I think what's difficult, it's very similar to that. New matter opening is pretty easy and good because you've then got control. It's the stuff that's been open for years or has got a very changeable team that people come and go off of that team, and ethical rules need to be applied. So I think where it's been really difficult to move from an open to a closed system is to actually reflect again that sort of working practice and being able to do the client service piece, and I think a big part that we really need in order to move that direction is self-service. Being able to accurately put in the right kind of granular security that you want, and only the lawyer involved or the partner in charge or whoever's on that matter knows exactly who should have access to that matter at that particular time, and that can change very quickly. So it's very difficult for IT to be the middleman and be the ones interpreting that and trying to do it on a department level or a practice level or a group level. And I think you end up causing more roadblocks and again squeezing people out of the sides of it. If they can't get access to the document when they need it, then it's a big roadblock for them, and that means that they need to go somewhere else.
I agree, but do you think I was thinking of perhaps partners putting that onto them to do it, do you think it would get done on a regular basis? I think that it's the assurance that if it does come via IT and is then audited by risk, we know that it's right. Whereas a FIANA may actually accidentally give permission to a lot more people than it was
Sure.
to have.
Yeah, no, it is, and I think you've got to have the right mechanism to make sure that it's the visibility of, you know, what is this? It can't be buried in a few sub-menus, and you've got to understand like a complicated system of. It's got. I think that self-service, you should be able to look at a matter and be very easily able to see who's got access to it and who's not, and also request a change to that can be effected immediately, not waiting for someone next week to do it. You know, and that's where it needs to go.
Yeah.
How about you, Andy or Graham? Is that something that your firms are looking at?
It's not something I'm involved with, I'm afraid.
I mean, from my perspective, it's quite current for us actually. I mean, we're reviewing that whole conflict process anyway. Sort of kind of owned by the partners. IT obviously apply the appropriate permissions accordingly for an information barrier. But like you say, I mean, it's more sort of a manual process for us rather than sort of automated. The matter race thing, or we call them cases, that process happens and then we apply permissions afterwards because our practice management system doesn't by default sort of say what the permission should be. So it's a little bit manual for us, but we're aware that although we're compliant from that perspective, as the firm's growing, because we're growing like 10% a year, this is becoming less manageable. So we need to have a better solution for providing that sort of surety around who can see what.
And I think it's really the sort of balance of that. The more complexity you add, the more difficult it is to manage. And I think you've got to make that balance of who's going to do that, how they're going to do it, and how you're going to keep that fresh and relevant all the time. And if you set very complicated and you end up with a big spider web of access controls that it quickly disappears out of view. So you do need to kind of have that balance of keeping it simple. And I guess what we're doing is trying to step up from that open model to the so for example, taking client documents and splitting them with business services, you've got a big chunk of things that you can do a big broad brush on. But when you start getting into that, you need to start them being drilling down more specifically with each group. But you've got to kind of have that first stage to make it worthwhile doing. So yeah, it's got to be a very gradual process, and you can't rush it because otherwise you just lose people along the way.
And Francesca, is that looking at?
Yeah, I mean, we have a mix, a rule-based system first that with some simple rules, you apply the security by default of the matters. And then on top of that, there is the possibility, of course, of making more close the security of the matter. But it's quite difficult because it's true. I mean, you have people that comes and go to the matter, and then they have to have access to the whole history of the matter. And then it's quite difficult to manage this. So there is not any at least up to date, any solution that we would like to apply. But maybe here is a ball for NetDocs, if they can think about what kind of system to deliver this security management easily and secure for the users. This is a key point. Yeah.
I think it speaks a little bit to the changing roles as well, that information governance is part of a role that needs to be filled, and someone needs to do that. And increasingly, IT doesn't seem like the right people to do that. So whether that's a changing role for the legal assistants or for a lawyer in that team, it's got to be someone that's close enough to the actual action to be effective.
Guy, what about from your perspective?
It is a really difficult area because some firms are coming at it from the point of view of having an open policy and looking to close that down a bit more. And other firms are looking at it from how do we keep it closed or move from an open. And there are so many variables here. I think from a supply perspective, what we're trying to do is put the tools in place that give you the ability to approach it from the perspective of the firm and the policies that the firm wants to introduce, but then to make that as easy as possible for different communities within the firm to adhere to that and to manage that policy. So whether that be in Jeff's case, where it's maybe at a practice group level where you have localized management of that and a self-service capability, or whether that's more on a compliance team to actually build that out from a client perspective or a practice group perspective at that level. I think we need to have give you the tools and the ability to do that in the easiest way that you can without having that spider web that Jeff talked about, where it's incredibly difficult to try and manage that on an ongoing basis. So that inheritance capability that we've got in the system elsewhere, where if we bring in a change, you inherit that change as one of 3,000 clients or thereabouts, and you get the benefit of that. In the same way with these kind of tools around the DLP and other areas of compliance, we need to give you the tools that allow you to actually create the environment and then have that inherited to all the different matters that pertain to that. So it's almost a copy and paste style approach to that, which is really the ethos behind this, I think. I don't know, I'd be interested in feedback on that.
Well, I think that sort of the security thing is, historically always been a sort of technical thing, and it's usually buried in a technical menu. And I think part of that is making that much more user friendly and an interface that a user could interact with.
Yeah.
Because I think the same is with iManage or NetDocs. The same is true, that it's not a particularly user friendly menu. It's something that you need to understand before you do it, and that can often turn people off. So that's a big part of, I think, bringing security into the forefront and making sure that you've got ownership of it. You've got to be able to understand how you can enact it.
Yeah, and I think with the introduction of DLP into the product over the last few months, for yourself and Francesc and others looking at that, the tick box capability in there is going to dramatically improve the ease of use of that, rather than having that being a fairly technical, as you say, requirement for somebody to understand and build out, just having tick box security model.
Finally, I'd like to ask quite a sort of open question, which is, we've covered quite a lot of different factors there in the cybersecurity area generally. Is there any sort of particular pressure point for each of you that we've not touched on yet, that really would be right up there, and whether it is because of the period, obviously everything is filtered through the challenges of the current time perhaps, or more generally?
Well, there is a fact, and this that probably 90% of the hacking that we have suffer have been always through email, and I begin to see the momentum where lawyers are thinking, okay, maybe email is not the best tool, and maybe we will have to move to a legal transaction platform where all the documents rely there without sending emails. I believe we're quite achieving this moment, and probably this is something that we would like to see in the next months, how we can build a real legal transaction platform within our DMS. This is something that probably we would expect.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, I think that's true with lawyers, especially seeing things like Teams and working on that with their clients. They are asking questions and saying, well, why can't it be this easy? This is what I want it to be. And I think that's the real challenge to set to the DMS, is how do you interact with that and make sure it is as easy as just adding an attachment in an email, because that's what you've got to compete with.
Yeah. I think certainly the collaboration capabilities that are coming out now as part of, well, talk for NetDocuments, but collaboration tools that are coming out now are well worth some investigation for those on call, because that's an area that is hugely interesting at the moment. As you say, Francesc, people using Teams there's an expectation level now that we can accommodate. So yeah, that's definitely, you know, a big highlight for firms looking at systems at this point in time. Sorry, Anne, I interrupted you.
It just, everyone's got their own platform, and that's the trouble. So every firm you deal with has got their own portal, their own version of egress switch, their own way of doing things, which is diametrically opposite to everyone signing up to Teams, which is a common platform. So until people agree on what the standard's going to be, you're never going to get to that that nirvana of Teams, unfortunately. But it's a nice ideal to work towards.
Yeah. How many firms on this call are actively using Teams and looking for integration through to Teams?
A little bit, but I think
we have some corporate instead of Teams, but
sorry.
Yeah, moving to 365, whether Teams is the right collaboration portal, I don't know. I mean, it's quite interesting about in the old days, we probably still do send out files, you know, on a secure file transfer mechanism. So with clients moving towards, you know, having shared collaboration spaces via the cloud is definitely the way to go. I see that. But then, of course, you've got, like you say, you've got so many different perimeters now, you know, so that almost want to start thinking about zero trust, you know, and all that kind of stuff. So it just opens up so many potential opportunities for threat.
Because I know Richard mentioned at the outset that this is one of a series of 5 round tables that we're doing. We're doing another one on which we're terming deliver, which is actually an area where we're going to be talking about collaboration tools and the capabilities in those areas. So we're probably bleeding into that one a little bit here, but certainly, you know, the Teams uptake for firms, particularly in the US and in the UK, we're seeing a lot of interest in that. So building a connector directly into Teams and delivering that a few months ago was a key part to ensuring that we're trying to keep pace with the demand in the industry as how that changes, particularly as a result of people working from home and Teams being much more prevalent as well as other tools in those areas.
Yeah, well, I think it just shows that there's, you know, it's not just Teams, it's, you know, it's yeah, every other aspect of remote working, that I think there's a tremendous opportunity to actually move forward on, you know, some of these things that have held us back for so long. You know, one of them being security. You know, how do you control it, and how do you get the intake? And now without the paper, you've got that. You know, the same thing goes with you know, collaboration. We've got this interest in it, and how do we then deliver that securely and make sure that we're delivering the right things to the right people and staying within our client kind of boundaries.
That's probably a good point to end on. Opportunity as well as risk in all of this. As I did mention at the beginning, we're going to be doing more roundtables on other aspects of legal delivery in the coming months. Guy, do you want to sort of round us off by telling us a little bit about that whole series?
Yeah, so the series that we're doing is really based around work inspired. So this is looking at different areas of engagement with applications for firms, and just spending a little bit of time talking through each one of those and getting thoughts and ideas out. And obviously today was around the protect. We also have another session on organize, which is, you know, the actual use of the documents and how you're delivering against that, the planning of that, and the delivery of that, and then the learning. What do we learn from that? So each one of those sessions will be walking through with different audiences, and we welcome you to join any one of those if you want to, or subscribe to them so that you can pick up the video interactions that have taken place during those calls. But yeah, thank you all very much for taking part today, and I hope it was useful for you as well as any audience that are watching this later on the recording. Back to you, Richard.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you from Briefing as well for sharing your thoughts and experiences so freely. Have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks
Cheers. Bye-bye.
very much.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.